Hi everyone, thanks for watching. You can support our work on our website ageoftruthtv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, BitChute and Brighteon. And remember to hit the bell for notifications. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To be sure not to miss any of our shows, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website ageoftruthtv. Hey Leo, hey!
Hi there, how are you?
Hey, good to see you again.
Good
Such a long time. Very nice to have you on the show. Are you good?
Yeah, all great.
Hi Leo.
Here we have also the great Lucas. How are you?
How are you, Leo? Nice to see you again. Wonderful.
Well, always a pleasure, always a pleasure.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 10th of February 2023. Our guest today is a well-known face in the arena of truth and conspiracy research, as well as an Illuminati whistleblower from his years as a rather high-level Freemason within Illuminati circles. He has been writing a profoundly informative and fascinating series of books, and his latest book has just been published. Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 8, From the Rise of the Antichrist to the Sound of the Devil and the Great Reset. He has been with us several times on Age of Truth TV, and we are happy to welcome him back on the show. Leo Zagami. Good evening from Copenhagen, Denmark, and good afternoon to our guest who is in Palm Springs, California. This is Age of Truth TV. Please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. You can find all of our videos and our library on our website, Age of Truth TV, which is our home. You can also find us on BitChute and Brighteon and other places. But now it's time for an explosive, a fascinating episode of our show with a guest who's been with us several times. It's always a pleasure to have him on. He has so much information to share, and he has just published a new book called Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 8, From the Rise of the Antichrist to the Sound of the Devil and the Great Reset. Once again, with his charm, his wit, and his fiery Italian spirit, we welcome on the show Leo Zagami. What a man.
Thank you very much for this great introduction. I couldn't have done it better. Of course, it's a big book, almost 700 pages, and it's already been a success. In the first few weeks, we have released it, and we are glad to say that this is the first book we actually have published in two languages simultaneously, which means Italian and English, and it was, as you can imagine, really an immense amount of work to get a book with over 1,000 citation footnotes, and of course a book dedicated to a subject which is usually, let me tell you, Lucas, not really I think, studied in the serious way it should have been approached from the start. Because here we are not just talking about Hollywood Illuminati or Satanism in Hollywood in a superficial manner. No, this book goes into the detail of the history of Hollywood right from the start, 1909, 1910, the very first film of D.W. Griffith, the age, of course, of the silence films, all the way into the rest, of course, of cinematography, which then becomes from an initial conservative force, which, of course, saw also the Red Scare, McCarthyism, and of course, going after communists, to a complete the opposite. After 100 years, we are instead to the woke mafia who is pushing their own sick agenda in places like the Grammy Awards, which of course I discussed in detail also in this book. And recently we have seen once again another confirmation of their hideous work and ideology, because this book is to explain, this book for me in a nutshell is like basically trying to show everybody, especially the young people, because I hope that also young people will be interested in reading and studying this book, how to protect themselves from this level of manipulation. And of course, it's not only cinematography, but it's also music. And as you know, I have also been directly involved in music for many years as a record producer and a DJ. And so my own experience goes in this book, as well as also my own family experience with my grandmother, Felicity Mason, incoming, who, of course, worked directly with people like William Burroughs and Brian Geisen for many years. So there is a lot to cover in this show today for Age of Truth. And thank you for having me on.
This is just so wonderful. And for people who want to hear more about your backstory and your fascinating history, being a rather high-ranking Freemason and being part of these secret societies linked to the Illuminati, which is why you wrote so extensively about it, they can see our first show that we did quite a number of years ago, which was a huge success on the channel, An Illuminati Whistleblower with Leo Zagami. And they can hear that to understand and go through all of your history, because that was very popular. But we don't want to talk that much about your background because we already covered that. But in this book, I mean, a lot of people would say, wow, another fat, big book from Leo Zagami, 700 pages. This is volume 8. Can he keep on writing? What more is there to say? You've talked about Satanism, the agenda of the New World Order, and all of these things linked to it. And of course, all of the Vatican secrets. And we certainly also want to get into that. But there is more. And this time, I think it's very fascinating for people, because this is about Hollywood. This is about movie stars and movie actors and singers and music, and also the sound of music, the frequency of music, which you will go into. And you talk about the sound of the devil. All of it seems to be linked to the devil and Satanism. Why, Leo?
Well, thank you for also explaining my past books have been about really trying to go into the depth of this Illuminati network made of various secret society, not only the society called Order of the Illuminati, because already back in the days when the Order of the Illuminati was founded, there were also other Illuminati, like the order close to Louis Claude de Saint Martin used to call themselves Illuminati. So we can say that Illuminati really are something that belongs to the tradition of the ancient mystery schools, but some way along the line, they got corrupted, they got into the dark side, and this book explains how an heresy, which I've already talked about in volume 7 and also in volume 4 of my Confessions, the Sabbathian Frankist heresy within Judaism, it's connected to Hollywood, because Hollywood becomes their playground right from the start, and also the playground of Aleister Crowley's followers. In fact, Aleister Crowley's first Gnostic Mass wasn't done in London, wasn't done in Paris. It was actually done in Hollywood, in a little side road of Hollywood Boulevard, by some of his acolytes. And Crowley, as soon as he saw what was going on during his time in the United States, a controversial period of his life, life, which has been written extensively about, he saw that these people could actually be the ideal subjects for his own work, especially because he noticed that they were, he said himself, they're overindulging in cocaine, orgies, and all the rest. Well, it seems like the ideal setting for Aleister Crowley, for his followers. And in fact, between the 20s and the 1930s, we see the birth of a lodge in right there, where we have basically on a side road of Hollywood Boulevard. And then later on, this lodge is going to move out of there in Pasadena. But the history of the OTO is basically the history of the modern Illuminati, who embraced fully this telema, this do what thou wilt philosophy, which wasn't really a creation of Aleister Crowley. We need to go back to Rabelais. There is, of course, a long history when it comes down to do what thou wilt. But let's talk about Hollywood. Hollywood is born out of an idea that basically started to come together between 1909 and 1910. Now, in that specific period of time, Aleister Crowley was conducting a ritual in Northern Africa, a ritual to evoke Choronzon, the demon of the abyss. And in that period of time, a Freemason called D.W. Griffith arrived in a small community here in Southern California on a dirt road, which would become Hollywood Boulevard. He decided to shoot his first film in Old California. Then later on, in 1915, he also filmed another film, which became very controversial, The Birth of a Nation. It became controversial because he portrayed the KKK as the heroes of the movie, going after the Black Americans. Of course, we go from one opposite to the other with Hollywood, it seems. But with this movie sanctioned also the birth of the collaboration. And there is, of course, documentation, FOIA documentation that was released to confirm all this, basically with the military-industrial complex. They gave them the tanks that basically were used, very primitive tanks. We're talking about 1915, so you can imagine a little more than big cans of Coke on wheels. But it was that sanctioned this collaboration that then lasted until now. And from the 1930s and 40s, they actually opened an office, which is still in existence, the Pentagon in Hollywood. And in my book, I show the inside of the office, the people who are responsible for this office, and I talk about also his history. So this book talks about the esoteric side, but it also talks about the military-industrial complex side of things, because it's all part of the same project, and you can't really separate one from the other. So for the first time, I explain how the Hollywood Babylon myth, Hollywood Babylon, of course, we go back also to that famous book, volume 1 and 2, two books by Kenneth Anger. Now, I used to know Kenneth Anger very well. I actually show also in my book letters he wrote me and all that. Kenneth Anger, for people who don't know, is still alive. He's still alive, alive and kicking. He's a member of the OTO, but he's the guy who inspired sympathy for the devil of the Rolling Stones. He's the guy who was considered the magician of the 1960s by the big bands back then. So, and also he made these underground movies who were actually occult rituals. He made a movie called Invocation of My Demon Brother, which actually was the first version of Lucifer Rising, but it was stolen by Bobby Beausoleil, who ended up with the Manson family. So the story is incredible. I mean, there is some great anecdotes also, like, for example, Bobby Beausoleil stealing the Lucifer Rising movie, which was basically a ritual conducted by Anton LaVey, Kenneth Anger on stage, the music of Mick Jagger, and all these people, and Bobby Beausoleil, who later on will be arrested, because Bobby Beausoleil will be arrested for one of the assassination conducted by Charles Manson's family. And of course, what happened was that Bobby Beausoleil stole this movie, he brought it to Death Valley, he dig a hole, he put it in, and it was never found again. So some frames of this movie survived, not enough to make a long reel out of it. So Kenneth Anger decided to just publish what was left as Invocation of My Demon Brother. And then he started to film this movie again, this time with the help of Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. And he ended up basically staying many years in Jimmy Page's basement until Jimmy Page got fed up and kicked him out. The movie basically took 10 years for him to edit and put together. It only lasts something like 45 minutes. I mean, it doesn't even last an hour. And this movie, it's another occult ritual that brings us also closer to the concept that they were trying to project here. Because with Invocation of My Demon Brother, the movie ends up with Bobby Desolé carrying this kid and saying, this is the product of a ritual. Basically, they were talking about the Antichrist that is also portrayed by Roman Polanski, who was himself somebody who used to go to these black masses of Anton LaVey right from the foundation, because there is also this connection with Anton LaVey. You see, I talk in this book about the developments of modern Satanism, how it developed. We can say that the original milieu where it kind of sprang out from was the Theosophical Society of Madame Blavatsky. And of course, Aleister Crowley became a protagonist of that milieu, and with the OTO, when he got initiated, well, actually, he got recognized immediately at a high level by Theodor Reuss, who was the co-founder of it, with an Austrian gentleman. And this OTO got kind of hijacked by Aleister Crowley, who himself wanted to promote, though, after 1904, the revelation that he had in Egypt, because we talked just earlier about the rituals he conducted in 1909. Then in 1910, he went back to London and he conducted another important ritual. The first time that Crowley did a public ritual on a stage, it was like a rock event, because it was like seeing Marilyn Manson on stage cutting himself like this, totally out of it on peyote or God knows what kind of other drugs, doing this ritual. And so I wanted to explain that Hollywood is the product of all this. And so...
Was Aleister Crowley part of the foundation of Hollywood? Was he there that early? And also, I think a lot of people will be interested in knowing if what you're saying is right, obviously, that Hollywood was based on a satanic idea, actually, okay, or that occult philosophy.
Sure. Okay. So what happened was this. Freemasonry laid its foundation in Hollywood because D.W. Griffith was a Freemason, and later on all the various people, Warner Brothers. I explain even in this book all the lodges where they used to meet and everything. So this book has details that are very much correct. Like when it comes down to what Crowley thought about Hollywood, of course, I went on to the work of Kenneth Anger, because Kenneth Anger is a reliable source when it comes to that. But also because Kenneth Anger is the guy who picks up on the Hollywood Babylon concept, which now has been also just released with a new movie with Brad Pitt, Babylon, which is kind of like taking much of what I wrote here, but in a fictional way. Why there is this connection with Babylon and with the occult, like you just asked me. In 1916, a year after the birth of a nation, there was a lot of criticism about this movie from D.W. Griffith, because he was, of course, characterizing the KKK as heroes. So he went immediately on the defense, putting out another movie. This other movie will be the link to Hollywood, between Hollywood and Babylon. I'm talking about Intolerance. Intolerance is an incredible movie that used 10,000 actors, and part of the movie is staged in ancient Babylon. And they used 10,000 actors and they had to reconstruct. They didn't have graphics like today. They had to actually reconstruct the whole set, the gates of Babylon, Ishtar's elephants, everything was there. And it was left there for years in that dirt road that was Hollywood right at the start. So that gives you the idea of why then it became Hollywood. But it was like an occult foundation. The Babylonian story, which is portrayed in Intolerance, and everybody can go on Google and find Intolerance as well as Birth of a Nation. So, of course, Intolerance was his way of trying to get people to take him seriously again after the Birth of a Nation was heavily criticized for portraying and glorifying the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. But he was a Mason, and him, together with Charlie Chaplin, founded then United Artists. These are the founders of really and Charlie Chaplin was a pedophile as well as, many say, a Freemason.
Do we know that he was a pedophile?
Yes, we know he was not only a pedophile, he was also a communist. That's why in the early 50s, when he left Hollywood, he never went back. But there was also investigations on him regarding having taken advantage of a 14-year-old boy and many others, maybe.
Really? Well, we do know that he had a lot of children, and he kept on having children when he was in his 80s, I believe. But that, well, nobody would suspect that he was a pedophile, but I mean, you've done some research on that, yes, or what?
Well, absolutely. I mean, all the research that I've done has been conducted in archives, police archives, FBI archives, archives of foreign intelligence sources.
There seemed to be such a huge network of pedophiles in Hollywood working around the Hollywood, and not just actors, but also people behind the scenes. I mean, that is of course linked to Satanism, but like my first question, what was it? Was Hollywood even founded on the philosophy of the occult and Satanism?
It was founded by Freemasons, so they laid the foundations of Hollywood.
But not all Freemasons are Satanists, and a lot of them don't know about what is actually going on when they reach the higher levels.
The Freemasons in Hollywood knew exactly what they were doing when they were laying these foundations, and that's why also this reference to ancient Babylon from a Freemason who was D.W. Griffith. It's true, low-level Freemasons, they don't know much, but at the same time, they partake to something which is, of course, manipulated from behind the scenes. And when it comes down to Aleister Crowley, he wasn't only a Freemason, he was also a member of this organization called the Ordo Templi Orientis. So we shouldn't, of course, make confusions between these organizations, because, of course, people might say, then you create, you want to just mix everything up and create a chaos out of it. No, I discuss very much in detail what the lodges involved with Hollywood, the Freemason lodges did, but also what the OTO lodges did and what other organizations did. But the Occult Foundation was definitely laid there at the very start from Freemasons who had knowledge about occultism. That's the truth. Why you have Babylon and basically the gates of Babylon, this amazing scenography left for years in this dirt road that used to be in the middle of nowhere, and starts gathering people from all over the world, and basically it becomes like this new attraction, which is cinema. And cinema, I mean, when I wrote this book, I didn't see Babylon, the recent film which has been published by the maker, the film director of La La Land. But recently, people who have seen it, and I've not yet wanted to see this movie because I want to wait.
I haven't seen it yet either.
But what happened is that some friends of mine, their daughters went to see it, and they were shocked. They were shocked because it contains Satanism, blatant Satanism, in-your-face Satanism. The decadence of it confirmed everything I said in my book. So it's like they tried to, of course, with Babylon, keep the fictional kind of element. Like they didn't want to reference to direct names, so then people would go and research and say, and then they will, when they start researching, they will make 1 + 1 is 2, and they will understand the whole thing. Keeping it in the realm of fantasy, with Babylon, and it kind of gives them the possibility of talking about truths that can be very uncomforting for some people, just like it happened with the TV series dedicated to Jack Parsons, Rocket Man, with basically the CBS canceled the whole series after I think it was 2 years, this series with Jack Parsons, which literally showed us very much we're not talking here about Elton John, Rocket Man. I want to confront people. Here we are talking about Jack Parsons, who was basically the guy who, in fact, in reality, it should be called Strange Angel, because Strange Angels, Jack Parsons is the original Rocket Man, and he's the guy who was working for what became later on NASA, right at the start. So it's basically Strange Angel, the title that you should search for if you want to find this TV series, and rather than Rocket Man. But the subject of this drama series is very detailed. I mean, you can see the occult rituals when they used to come here in Palm Springs, when they used to be doing the occult rituals of the OTO. It's very detailed. The fact that Jack Parsons was connected to this lodge, which was born in Hollywood between the 20s and 30s, developed, and then he became part of it later on, and between the 30s and 40s, he even had the possibility at one point to welcome into his lodge Hubbard, who became later on the founder of Scientology. So we have Strange Angel, for example, is just another, like fictional, but not fictional, because actually, when it comes down to Strange Angel, the TV series, they have been much more detailed and accurate. They wanted to portray more a biographical kind of situation rather than leave it to fantasy.
Yeah, and Hollywood is known throughout the ages to put out truths and a lot of wild stuff that actually is the truth, but they put it under the guise of fiction. And we've seen that so many times, also in the X-Files and even Star Wars, and also all the Kubrick films and Polanski films. And you just mentioned Polanski before also. He was linked to the whole Manson murders and Sharon Tate and Rosemary's Baby and Mia Farrow and all of these. And this is also...
When it comes, for example, to Mia Farrow, I have also a very detailed account of the 60s and what she did when she went with the Beatles, when she visited the Beatles in India, what happened back then with Mia Farrow. The sister of Mia Farrow, both have said to have actually inspired a couple of songs by the Beatles who were there during that period. And Mia Farrow later on said she was actually raped by the Maharishi. So, I mean...
Really? And she was also married to Frank Sinatra during the time of when she did Rosemary's Baby.
In fact, she went... after I think she divorced from Frank, she broke up from Frank Sinatra, and to, let's say, recover, she went to India to visit the Maharishi, where everybody was hanging out, having this mystical time. Now, I explained why all these people were attracted to these Indian gurus that were arriving from the Far East back then, because they were basically accepting what was promoted for a long time by the Theosophical Society. The embracing these gurus from the Far East was actually first done by the Theosophical Society.
Madame Blavatsky was
later on Annie Besant with, of course, Krishnamurti. So here we are in a situation, this book, that doesn't speculate on anything. This book doesn't have one speculation. It has the most credible sources, and I wanted to also give the possibility at the end of the book, people can go, and there is over 1,020 footnotes and citation from credible sources that they can verify every single thing written in this book, because I didn't want to just say something and then have somebody coming, but that's not true. Oh, okay, it's not true.
It's always important to substantiate whatever you're writing.
Yes, I think that the big problem with some researchers in the truth movement has not been to cite enough and make people acquainted with the original sources of where you are taking all this knowledge from.
There's a lot of confusion in this truth movement, and sadly, it's very divided. And that's not a very good thing. We talk about it a lot here also, but we like to invite all kinds of speakers on. But I think it's up to the audience to actually make their own judgment whether or not this resonates with them or not.
One thing, Lucas, I was talking not so long ago with a Freemason about something. I can't even remember exactly what. There was an information that I gave out on one of my articles, and he was critical about it until I actually gave him the source, and the source was verified. And so at that point, he was like, he backed off. He said, okay, you are right. But he said, can't I be critical? I said, no. When you have information that is proven to you 100%, you can't criticize facts. You can criticize me maybe making an hypothesis or maybe theorizing or maybe being critical of something because I personally don't like it. You can criticize that.
People can criticize your opinion that you're writing in your book or saying, but whatever you have researched to be right and a real quote or a fact, that should be
because my work is, first of all, as an investigative journalist. Of course, I was directly involved with the secret society, so it gives me an advantage point here, so I can always analyze things with a different perspective, and that is an advantage. But I want to still do the work of an investigative journalist when I conduct this kind of work, because also another thing, Lucas, if I didn't write all those, if I didn't put all my sources, I would be sued and I would be ruined by these people. Because
you would, and also a lot of people would not believe you or read your books. But I mean, it's extensive research that you've done, and you really go very in depth in all of those books, and that's why I guess a volume 8 is now out. I mean, this is quite extraordinary, huh? Quite a library.
Yeah, but for example, volume 7, is about the occult roots of the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, and all those people. It's very rare that those kind of people can drive you into a lawsuit because it's not their interest to give you any credibility. When it comes instead to the show business, this was the first time I had to be even more detailed than ever to avoid any problem. Aside from the fact that I live in Palm Springs, I know a lot of people in Hollywood. My friend Roseanne Barr has been a victim of the Hollywood establishment. She's just coming out now with a new show after so long on Fox Nation, which is actually dedicated to the fact she was canceled.
Is she coming out with a new show? That's amazing to hear, because really she's been through a lot, Roseanne. She's quite remarkable, isn't she?
Absolutely, and she's launching this show on Fox Nation with a big ad on the Super Bowl night. So it's going to be a big thing. And I've spoke a lot with Rosanna about it, and she was very helpful when I did this book, also when it comes down to some of the information. So you see, I try to do this book without any speculation. And I talk, for example, also of our common friend, the late Jordan Maxwell.
I was just going to mention Jordan, our mutual friend there. Of course, there's so much knowledge that not only we heard from him, but you got firsthand, huh?
No, but also involvement. He was involved in Hollywood during the whole period of his life as the heir to Manly P. Hall, who was, as some of you may know, a very celebrated Freemason and, of course, very knowledgeable about the esoteric world. And his heir has been for decades until his death last year, Jordan, who, of course, was doing these events in the middle of the night in Hollywood studios where all these film directors will come and they will gain information from him. So, and then that information will then be relayed on films like Star Wars, George Lucas, and we're not talking about small things here. We're talking about things that have characterized the history of Hollywood. So his involvement also with various hip-hop personalities, music personalities. And so I wanted to really also give him a tribute in this book. In fact, there is a photo of his tribute that was conducted inside a Masonic lodge after his death. And for the first time, actually, I show a photo inside here of the tribute inside the Masonic Lodge. So there is
a lot of people that are watching this are very skeptical about anything that is Freemasonic, of course. So you probably have to clear up that Jordan was not somebody who was working behind the scenes.
I think we discussed very extensively with my friend Brian when we came on your show.
Yes, and people, I also want to say that if people haven't seen that show that we did last year as a tribute to Jordan Maxwell with you and Brian Vecchio, they must see it because it's a wonderful tribute and a great show.
Jordan got initiated, and he told me this, he was very open about it, only for curiosity. He never went above the entered apprentice degree. Okay, this has to be very clear for all of you who are watching. He was bestowed, given high degrees by various rights, simply because he was a high knowledgeable individual, but he never went into lodges doing all these weird rituals. He only did the ritual of the initiation into the first degree, which is the enter apprentice. After that, he got to have a relationship with this lodge, and eventually that's why they courtesy, it was a courtesy they did to actually have his tribute there after his death. But like I said, I'm sure that the Freemasons in a few decades would say, oh, Jordan Maxwell was a great Freemason. He was one of us, like they always do it, because they like to take famous people and get, this guy was a Freemason, this other guy was. But when it comes down to Jordan Maxwell, he was rather skeptical because, of course, he was also very critical of the secret societies that shaped up the New World Order.
He certainly was. He was outing it. He was exposing them for years and years since 1959. He was one of the first, if he wasn't the first one.
The first. And of course, he worked also with the CBS on a TVC. I mean, he did a lot of things in Hollywood. And so I think that talking about them was very important for me in this book, but also explaining how his theories, his work, his research on the Gnosticism, many other things were really embraced by Hollywood because they themselves, of course, had this occult background and wanted to understand more. And so I think that at times they took advantage of Jordan, to tell you the truth, because he was such a nice guy. And you met him, and you knew him personally. So, I mean, yes. I'm not talking about a person you don't know. You know how available I was. Okay. As an
he was a really warm and wonderful man, and we got to know him firsthand and got to spend time with him. And that's why I can say it personally when you actually meet and know somebody. And he did not live large, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And so he had all these, all these famous people, actors, calling him, asking him for, inviting him to film sets. He often used to tell me stories about him on the film set of Steven Spielberg or another film director. And it was amazing, all these anecdotes that, of course, he had. In this book, though, of course, I'm denouncing the Satanism of Hollywood. And so I want to explain the basis of it. And, of course, let's say that while you can, of course, embrace all the symbolism and be amazed by it, then there is these people who are literally using the occult and shaping Hollywood for their infamous plan, which is basically one day to they're preparing the way for the Antichrist. That was it. The last 100 years were simply destroying certain values, creating certain others, and making sure that our society will be able to fully embrace the Antichrist when he presents us. If the Antichrist came out immediately 100 years ago, people would be horrified. They will never embrace him. But nowadays, you just turn on the TV and see the Grammy Awards. You see that they're putting the flames of hell there, and that the guy has the horns, and that of course you have to be a transsexual, you have to be this, you have to be that to be embraced. Now, The thing
and
is,
what you are just mentioning here, because maybe in some time ahead, when people are watching this, we are in the beginning of 2023, and the Grammy Awards was just there, and there was this very satanic dark ritual by this singer Sam Smith and his red devilish dancers. What was that all about? Can you just mention why it was so blatantly out there? It was so in your face like never before, right?
I just published an article, I think yesterday, because of course America is going completely insane. I published 2 articles in a week where I cited Sam Smith, because if you go back to 2015 and you put the Michigan Daily and Sam Smith, you will get that Sam Smith has found himself inside a Masonic temple. He actually performed in it. So you see, the thing is, when you are basically talking about Freemasonry today, it's not the same Freemasonry at the time of John Wayne. So I wanted to explain this in my book, how things went completely wrong in Hollywood. Because, well, wrong. I mean, some people might say that John Wayne was just a hideous macho man and that kind of values were the bigot values. Well, instead, others would say that those values helped shape America in one of the most beautiful era, which was the American Dream era of the 1950s, 60s. Then something happened, though, in the 60s. And it wasn't only the Black Masses and Anton LaVey founding the Church of Satan and making it pop-tastic for everybody, or many other things. Aleister Crowley becoming ever so famous with the Beatles putting him on the cover of St. Japan. It's not only that. There was an element that was used by this alchemist, LSD, and it was used in quantities that are, of course, in experiments also. Woodstock, I explain in my book with all the names of all the people involved, the agents of the CIA who brought the drugs, everything, was an experiment on the use of LSD. And it transformed...
Part of the MK Ultra operation that was ongoing, and Tavistock Institute, huh?
And that's why Tavistock Institute has an extensive role in my book, and I talk about it in the first chapters of my book. But also, when it comes to the transformation of Hollywood, we can see Cary Grant. Now, Cary Grant seems to... is a classic actor, no? We see him in those old movies, and he seems like a very put-together guy. But the thing is, he started to embrace LSD. Why did he embrace LSD? There was a guy, and I talk about this guy who himself brought LSD to Hollywood. Of course, working with the intelligence services, all this was manipulated. And let me tell you, imagine that the Vatican gave an official permission to their priests to use LSD in that period. Something that is truly shocking, because it was so popular, the LSD, and it was something really popular. But also,
well, they started to use LSD way back in, I think, the late 40s or 50s when they did the MK Ultra experiments on victims and people for mind control purposes after Operation Paperclip with the Nazi scientists.
That wasn't enough. They wanted to transform the whole of society. They wanted to transform Hollywood. The Hollywood people who once were those conservatives who were promoting certain values found themselves between the 60s and 70s totally wiped away. And John Wayne suddenly was like, passé. And there was a new era of people who were bringing new films that then became then you had Apocalypse Now, you had all these films that really, without LSD, you will not have these films. You will not have a lot of the work of people, even like Oliver Stone or other people who made the history of Hollywood. So in the late 50s, at the height of his fame, of course, Cary Grant sets out on a journey in search of the true self. But that is because a lot of people were doing that because, like you said, there was MK Ultra. But who was directing MK Ultra? Question. Who was the real mind who was on top of MK Ultra? Question.
Well, that was, of course, the CIA, but also the Nazi.
There is a person. It's called Aldous Huxley, who came from England. here to California, and he was working. And of course, you know, the brother of Huxley also was a
Brave New World.
Well, and Brave New World, and of course, the Doors of Perception. Then you had the Doors with Jim Morrison, who was the son of a military and involved with the military industrial complex. So all this, of course. So we have, of course, this LSD was basically used to transform the masses. It was an alchemical operation, and Timothy Leary, who was himself considering, I met Timothy Leary, I talk about it in the book, in the early 90s in England. Timothy Leary basically was, he said, I'm the heir of Aleister Crowley. I'm doing the work of Aleister. He said it. We have a video, which I link as a source in my book, and Timothy Leary says, I'm conducting the work of Aleister Crowley.
Was he a dark person? Because that's always a question that comes up. If Timothy Leary was actually doing work for the bad side or for the good side, what would you say?
Yeah, he was played into working for the dark side. That's that. And in fact, in my book, I also explain how William Burroughs reacted to all this. How William Burroughs was given the LSD, but then said, and he was brought, he went all the way to Morocco. He was, as you know, he was very much into the musicians of Jujuka with Brian Geisen, and they were like, you know, they were very much there in Northern Africa, enjoying a period in which my grandmother was also there with them. So, you know, I have first-hand information. I have actually an agenda for my grandmother this big, with all the stories of what happened.
And we also want to get into the topic of your grandmother, because that's also very interesting. But William Burroughs, just for people, he was a New York phenomenon, right? He was involved in the with Andy Warhol and Paul Morrissey and all these people, right?
I think that calling him a New York phenomenon is limited, because he was a worldwide phenomenon. He was a guy who, like only a few others, launched that legend of the Beat Hotel, the Beatniks. And of course, he was also known in New York because he had that bunker place where it was all really, I mean, I went to New York in 1982. My grandmother used to live in the building that basically they did Rosemary's Baby. So, I mean, I was like, so I was very much into the perfect set.
Lots of famous actors lived there.
Yes, absolutely.
Lauren Bacall, and I think even, did John Lennon live there as well? Yes,
absolutely. Yes. In fact, the coincidence was that many years after, I lived in London, in Church Street, and the guy who lived on top of me was the babysitter of John Lennon, a Swedish guy who used to babysit the children of John Lennon. So, no, but going back to that, when my first visit, the first people I met in New York, the very first person was Quentin Crisp.
Wow, that was also quite a personality, huh?
Yeah. But Quentin Crisp made a movie, An Alien in New York, which also inspired the track with Sting, no?
Sting.
In this movie, if you go, you can find it on Google, there is my grandmother, the protagonists are my grandmother, Quentin Crisp, then you have Sting, and you can actually find this movie on Google. So for everybody interested in knowing a little bit more about my grandmother, I would say just go into that movie on Google, and you can find it, and it's rather amazing. But
can I just say, Leo, here, just for the audience, your grandmother was actress Felicity Mason, who was also an author of several erotic books describing her sexual adventures. She wrote under the pseudonym Anne Cumming. And you talk in your book about how she was involved in what you call the New York occult scene, which I guess is what you're describing right now with William Burroughs. Would you say that she was involved in Satanism?
I say that she had an approach that was very much thelemic, because she gave me the first book of Aleister Crowley when I was 12 years old, just after my visit in New York. And it was, or just a bit earlier, I don't know, but it was very early in my life. I got this Book of Thoth, which was one of the first books that was published by Samuel Weiser. And of course, in my book, I can't, of course, go in all the details because I will spoil it for all the readers. But I can tell you that she was involved with one of the most eminent personalities of the OTO, who co-founded the Tauti Lodge of the OTO in New York. So if we consider Crowleyanity and Telema Satanism, which is not completely correct because they will consider it, they say they are more like, but in the end they are satanic. That's the thing. So this book is dedicated to my grandmother, because without her I would have never be able to see all this, to meet all these people. And for that reason, I dedicate to her. But I also...
But did she involve you in all of this? I mean, if you were 12 years old, that's pretty early.
I was never laid a hand on or involved in any occult rituals. And this was because my grandmother was very protective towards me. But she told me the stories. She actually went in front of the camera and she said that they were doing these eyes wide shut rituals in France and stuff, like, you know, all naked, and famous important heads of state and stuff. She used to say that, and she actually said it on camera. I still have it on a VHS tape in Italy. And so she was very open about it. And I went all over the world with her. So, I mean, she used to bring me around because I was her favorite grandson. But I was lucky because she was not somebody who will involve me in something she didn't like. She presented me, for example, Genesis P-Orridge. And Genesis P-Orridge, as you know, was the founder of the Temple of Psychic Youth. He was the guy who created Psychic TV. He was the guy without who today we will not have probably neither the rave phenomenon, neither all the piercings or all the tattoos, because the tattoos and the piercings were promoted by the secret society called the Temple of Psychic Youth, which I describe here in my book, all the secrets of this. And then there was another organization that was connected with the Temple of Psychic Youth, which Genesis P-Orridge was part of, which was the Esoteric Order of Dagon, whose members were Michael Aquino. So, I mean,
yeah. Oh my God, that's quite a horrifying character, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I met these people. I even encountered Aquino. I talked.
Did you meet Michael Aquino?
I never met him, but I used to exchange letters with him. And
really?
Yes, I published one of them in one of my books, I think, volume 2 of my.
But he was supposedly quite a dangerous man. What has he not done?
Okay, and he actually was the one who confirmed me that real Satanism was actually the Theosophical Society. He said, I don't follow anything else. I follow the Theosophical Society, told me. And I was like, what? So then I needed to...
but that was even also something that Anson Sander LaVey said when he did the Satanic Bible. I mean, that was not real Satanism as you have described it, and many other researchers we've had on the show and people who have been part of satanic rituals when they were younger. I mean, this was a pop art kind of version of Satanism that he wrote in that Satanic Bible, huh?
Absolutely. In fact, in my book, I'm very methodical about it. I say there is the first stage of modern Satanism. Of course, we can say Aleister Crowley, because, of course, if we go and be really honest about his work, is satanic. And he actually even, I mean, if you study what it is Satanism. Do what thou wilt brings you inevitably to Satanism. And
you can see the pictures of Crowley, what he's doing with the symbolism and what he's wearing.
But also we said he participated to Hollywood's establishment because Hollywood establishment at the very early start was a product of Sabbathian Frankism. Now, without having to go back into Sabbathian Frankism because it's complex, but we can say what it is just for our...
Well, for the audience, please talk about it. It is a fascinating thing.
In a nutshell, there was a Jewish heretic who declared himself to be a Messiah, Sabbatai Zevi, and he created basically this cult within Judaism, who became then a crypto-Judaic cult when he came out and declared himself Muslim, but said, you can continue in secret, though, my own cult. And then this cult that we will talk about in a second was followed up by his heir, almost 100 years later, Jacob Frank. in Poland, he himself said he was the reincarnation of Sabbatai, because people have to understand that in Judaism, you believe in reincarnation. They believe in reincarnation. So that's why you have Sabbathean Frankists, because Frankists come from Jacob Frank and Sabbathean from Sabbatai Zevi. But Sabbatai Zevi basically said, we need to arrive to the Messianic era, but we need to accelerate the process. And the way to accelerate the process is to indulge in sin. And that's where sexual magic was created. Crowley didn't create sexual magic. Actually, Madame Blavatsky herself was a disciple of Max Theon, who was a Sabbathean. And then you go back and we see that the Frankists, the Sabbathean Frankists, were involved also in very important secret societies back in Germany in the 18th century, and connected to the Illuminati. And so what they did, Sabbatai Zevi started these orgies with his wife, other women, couples, doing all this, but it was all done because they said, more we indulge in sin, more the Messiah is going to have to come and save us.
Yeah,
I know.
That's a good excuse, huh?
No, well, it's a good excuse, but this is a very sick view. So it's basically purification through sin. It's insane. The whole concept around the Sabbatheanism, and then later on also what Jacob Frank did, because Jacob Frank became, while Sabbatai Zevi was in Turkey, so he worked mainly with the Muslim Sultan of Turkey kind of background there, had all those people there. So he worked within that kind of context. Jacob Frank was instead born in a Catholic context, and he actually brought to the Catholic Church almost 20,000 converts and said, this is my price, now you make me a noble. So he was nobilitated. He ended up his life as an aristocrat with a big palace and stuff, Jacob Frank. But to go back,
then all of these people in the Vatican and the Catholic Church, they could actually indulge in these Sabbatean Frankist orgies, huh?
Okay. I explain very well, especially in volume 4, but I also explain in volume 8 about this. There is a connection between the Sabbathean Frankists and the Jesuits, because of course these two, because at times the truth movement tends to say, I believe only that everything is done by the Sabbathean Frankists, or everything is done by the Jesuits. I don't believe, or everything is done by this, the Bilderberg. No,
it's all connected.
Yes. All connected. So what happens here is this, that I explain very much in detail in volume 8, the Frankfurt School, which that then came to America and inspired what is now the woke ideology, was born in Frankfurt. In Frankfurt, there was one of the lodges of the Sabbathean Frankists. The Rothschilds became...
Yeah, the Rothschilds had a mansion there up just north of Frankfurt, huh?
Yes, and basically... all my information comes from rabbis. I got my information from people in the Chabad organization, Chabad, however you want to call it, which is Orthodox rabbis, who give me and send me books so I can actually cite the proper sources, and I can cite rabbis instead of just citing people out of nowhere. So these people gave me the possibility to study rabbis like Rabbi Melvin, another rabbi, and that really were trying to fight the Sabbathean Frankists. I mean, that's why I said that this book would be an essential reading for Kanye West. What a confused individual who condemns...
I was going to ask you about Kanye West. Do you want to go into that now, or do you still want to continue on the... because I did wanted to ask you about certain people that people always mention these days as being part of the Illuminati, or shall we say the dark occultists behind the music industry, like Beyonce, Jay-Z, and now Kanye West and everything that happened there, which maybe you can go into detail about. And also Lady Gaga, for example, she's always doing all of these symbolic videos full of, Satanism, basically. Can you talk about these people? How high ranking are they?
They are in my book.
Yeah,
And
but people will we will put links to how they can get the book.
But I want to explain. They are in my book, but it's not like I go into the symbolism of this or this other video, because I go into the actual facts. For example, Lady Gaga put the music of Bobby Beausoleil, made for the film Lucifer Rising, in jail, of Kenneth Anger, for her own documentary on Netflix. That just that gives you I mean, why are you using the music for Lucifer Rising into your documentary? That music was done in a jail by a guy who murdered people, a guy who is still in jail. In fact, Bobby Beausoleil, the month after Lady Gaga put the music on this documentary, he tried to actually get pardoned by the Californian authorities, saying, "Oh, my music is being used by Lady Gaga, so now I should get out of jail." And fortunately, he's still in jail. But anyway, he made various appeals, but they were never accepted. Lady Gaga sang the national anthem with Joe Biden. Lady Gaga is not just somebody that comes out of nowhere.
But haven't you seen the picture of Lady Gaga as the only woman standing behind all of the presidents except for Trump? There's a picture a few years ago with even George Senior Bush and Obama and Clinton and everybody. She's the only one standing there as almost like the whore of Babylon. You were mentioning Babylon before. Symbolism again, huh?
So, and also her meeting with the Queen. The Queen was a very important figure. And in fact, in the last chapters of my book, I go into the details of who are these Illuminati, who is going to be this Antichrist, so we start speculating about really who is going to be this Antichrist. And we go into, of course, speculation about Prince Charles, Prince William, because we are talking about bloodlines here. We could also say that, a novel Antichrist is an actor like Volodymyr Zelensky. I talk about Volodymyr Zelensky in this book because I talk about the International Order of Saint Stanislaus, which is the Masonic order between Poland and Ukraine, financed by Soros, who has created this whole scenario, which unfortunately has led to the war and the intervention of Russia. Before Russia intervened, there was a war that started, as you know, in 2014. But what people don't know is that in 2012, Ukrainian politicians close to Russia tried to outlaw Freemasonry and the International Order of St. Stanislaus in Ukraine. And the actual logo, the symbol of this order, is now used for the ground forces of Ukraine. So you see, this is a Masonic order. I actually met many years ago the Grand Master, who at the time was a guy called Stephen Turner, who was an English guy, who was appointed Grand Master, who was very knowledgeable, but he was, you know why he was appointed?
No.
MI6.
Sure.
So
what a surprise, huh?
What a surprise.
But you also know that Zelensky is an actor. He's an actor. That's his background.
That's why in my book, I show how the wife that goes, is portrayed as this fashion icon. But also she went for a shopping spree and spent $40,000 in Paris.
They have a great time, huh?
Well, they have a great time on the expense of the Ukrainian people. But the thing is that Volodymyr Zelensky is, of course, a puppet. This year we are talking about the Satanic show of Sam Smith and the other transsexual lady who was with him. Last year we had Volodymyr Zelensky delivering a speech at the Grammy Awards. So, I mean, it's all part of the same project. Pfizer sponsors and it's all the same project.
It's all about the implementation of the New World Order through UN Agenda 21 and then the Great Reset and World Economic Forum, of course.
But why all this? Why all this?
Why all this, Leo? Please.
Why all this? Because, like I tried to explain, from volume 6.66 into volume 7 and then now in volume 8, we are talking about also cyber Satan, the artificial intelligence that soon is going to take control of the show. So then at that point, it will help the Antichrist taking complete control of the planet.
But do you think that it will happen? Because this is a question that we all have, especially in this truth community. Okay. Yeah, but Leo, do you think that it will actually happen, that the Great Reset,
It's happening. Is happening.
Can we stop it? Can we stop the Great Reset? Can we stop the cyber states and AI from taking full control over our thoughts, our emotions, and everything?
You are right to ask me that, because it's very important that people also understand what they can do to avoid all this. And that is something that I will go into depth also in volume 7 of my Confessions. But in volume 8, I have a whole chapter on how Klaus Schwab is manipulating films in Hollywood. Actually, I have a whole list of films that the World Economic Forum has encouraged viewing, like The Day After Tomorrow, but also many other minor films that are literally pushed. And also this year they came out, I mean, after I brought out the book, this year they met in Davos and they actually said it openly. We control Hollywood. We let them know what kind of subjects, if they have to have more LGBT characters, more Black characters, more Chinese characters. China is also a very important player in Hollywood these days. But going back to the Cyber Satan, and why I said China and Cyber Satan is very important, because China is the nation that would ultimately in 2030 have control over Cyber Satan. But actually Cyber Satan will have control over them, because stupid are the humans who think they will be able to control the genie after it comes out of the bottle. It's not possible to, once it comes out, that's it. It's like, today we have Bill Gates saying the chat box, whatever, is going to be the biggest thing, and that they are doing the best AI. And then Google is trying to do the best AI. OpenAI source brought by Microsoft instead wants to do. Everybody wants, and then of course Elon Musk says he wants to do the best AI, and he creates a computer brain interface also in the process, and gets all the planet rigged with his satellites. The thing is that people need to understand, we are in 2023. Within the next 7 years, you will be forced out of your cities. Otherwise, you will have to be microchipped, and you will have to you will have no other chance than abandoning this society. So it's stupid to even think we can fight them, because if you go and study every single religious text in the Abrahamic faiths, but also in other faiths, this is a period that was prophesied in a variety of different ways. But ultimately, we will have to make a choice. You who are watching will have to make a choice. Will I continue to live in LA if I know that LA is a smart city that requires microchip before you enter the city? Will you be able to go to New York? No. Will you be able to go to Rome, Milan? No. You will have to understand, we can't defeat them. We have to simply construct a different society.
So you're saying we can't defeat them. It's not possible. That doesn't leave a lot of hope, does it?
No. It leaves the hope, because the hope was given to us by Jesus Christ and his followers also, and the prophecies that were done in Patmos by John in the Apocalypse. There is no problem. Of course, do you want to accept microchipping like they do in Sweden and the mark of the beast? No. But
Are you kidding?
Will be forced. Yes, but you in Denmark will be forced to. So there will be certain territories, like for example, microchipping will first start in the EU, like cattle. And that is a warning that I want to do to all the people who are watching us from the EU. Have a plan, an emergency plan to leave the EU, because it's one of the most dangerous areas of the New World Order, in which they will force people into microchipping very soon. Then you have, of course, the possibility of saying, oh, well, I want to ignore all this. I want to go and live on a mountain. No, because they, at one point or the other, will reach you, and they will knock on your door. And it's not going to be even a human being maybe that's going to knock on your door. It's going to be a robot. And you're going to be a humanoid of some kind, a cyborg created between a man and a robot. I mean, there will be also that transhumanist thing, which is part of the Antichrist ideology that is being pushed, of course, in Hollywood for many years. I mean, we have, Terminator, I mean, it makes us understand also the war against the machine that we might be facing in the future. But if people think that
and the Matrix films explains it very well. The opposites, the darkness and the light. Actually, that's really what those films are all about. But on a very sophisticated level and on a computerized level, right? Because it's all about numbers.
Yeah, but also in my book, I talk about the metaverse as the digital prison of the future. The metaverse that is now being promoted in Hollywood is being promoted by people like Snoop Doggy Dogg. People a guy spent almost $500,000 to buy a villa next to Snoop Doggy Dogg in the metaverse. It doesn't exist, the metaverse. It's going to be a digital prison, but that's where we're going to be caged while the elite runs around having wonderful lives in private islands. We will be enslaved if we don't wake up. So the solution.
But we're a lot of people who are awake, and a lot of and everybody who is watching our show and your shows and shows like that, we are awake. So we don't want to be enslaved by the New World Order and those satanic forces.
But that's why I'm saying, and I started to say this very clear in Volume 7, and I repeat in Volume 8, if you want to survive and keep your own way of life, we need to like-minded people need to come together and form communities that will then be established outside of the grid of cyber Satan. The cyber Satan grid will be a reality by 2030. And by then, you will no longer be able to interact anymore with these smart cities when their requirements will be so stringent. I mean, of course, you can decide to take 1 million vaccines and to have yourself microchipped and all the rest. And you can, at that point, have, a tranquil life in your little box in a big city, wherever they will. But you will own nothing and be happy. That's, remember, what they're saying. So, first of all, you will not own a car. It will be a car sharing. The car will arrive. It will be driven by the AI. You will not be able to go freely where you want because it's all conducted by this grid. They are constructing around us this grid with the excuse of the green. Oh, we are building all new and green, all sustainable. This is the excuse. The reality is that they are instead constructing a prison around us, a prison in which, of course, you will, you can stay in this house from this time to this time, you can stay in this office from this time to this time, this car sharing is available to you whenever you want. It's all, of course, controlled.
That's what the whole UN agenda is all about. But why do you think so many politicians, high level and also not that high level, and all of these Hollywood people and all of these people from different walks of life, but still out there in the public eye, why do you think all of them around the world agree to promote this agenda? Why are they part of this agenda? Why would they do it? This would be a catastrophe for their lives as well.
No, because they get paid. They are just like the useful idiots that go on stage and are happy at the Grammy Awards. They don't really think much about the consequences of their actions. They simply say, wow, like Sam Smith, I have a great life. I don't care. I go on stage. I can be the devil. I can be this. I can light. They don't care.
So you don't think he's really aware of what he's actually part of doing? And also what I asked you before about Beyonce and Jay-Z and Kanye West. What are their part in this?
Okay, there is people who are more conscious. Like Madonna is not conscious at all. She wanted to.
But don't you think she's a high priestess for the Illuminati?
No, absolutely. I mean, she contacted me once, many years ago.
Madonna?
Yes, she contacted me. It was 2005. I was working with the Regular Grand Lodge of England. We were actually chartering lodges around the world and things. And Rui Gabiro, who was in charge of the Regular Grand Lodge of England at that time, calls me. I was in Oslo at that time, and says, I'm here in London in the studio near Marble Arch with Madonna. She would like to meet you because she wants to open a lodge. And I said no. So, I mean, I never followed up on that, but because I have people who are close to Madonna, know a bit about Madonna.
Well, she was already into the Kabbalah at that time.
Yeah, she arrived also in Rome, in the Vatican, in 2009. And actually, I remember this priest from this important church in Rome called me and says, Madonna is here with his son, doing... So...
But how did Madonna know you already in 2005?
That was Masonic, internally, to the Masonic world, because we were basically, I was a record producer at the time, a DJ, and I was also involved, though, with the music business. So I was one of the few people who was, let's say, I was also in the OTO for many years. So I had all these links.
That's why you had these connections. But Madonna has always been promoted heavily and always been used as a pawn for, let's say, the cult or the Illuminati, whatever you called her.
From my point of, from what I gather of her personality and everything, she's now completely demonically possessed, and she's also very naive about it all. And she's gonna end up in hell, man. It's not a nice thing to say, but she's really a confused individual. I will exorcise Madonna if I met her now.
Well, here in 2023, she almost looks unrecognizable. You can hardly tell that it's her anymore.
I dedicated the last chapter also, I talk about Beyoncé, and I talk also in my book about Kanye West. And I actually invited Kanye West to read this book while I was on InfoWars, because he went on InfoWars with my friend Alex. So I said he should read this book because he has a very confused perspective of the Jewish problem. He thinks that all the Jews have to be condemned. He calls them, Zionists. Then you have also all this disinformation with the Khazarians and all this BS. No, the problem is the Sabbathian Frankists. Kanye West needs to study and needs to address the problem with who he needs to. He can't be so, otherwise he's basically doing a big mistake. He's supporting Adolf Hitler, who was the product of a Sabbathian Frankist ritual. Adolf Hitler, and not me who says this is a rabbi who said this, who actually wrote it in a book, that Adolf Hitler was the product of a ritual, and he was partly Jewish, in fact.
Yeah, he was part Jewish, wasn't he? And was he initiated by the Rothschilds?
That I don't know. The information that I got hold of was that he was the product of a ritual. And of course, I made a lot of studies regarding all the occult background that put him where he is, because the Thule Gesellschaft that was founded with the German Order in 1919 was part of the Sabbathian Frankist plot, because there was this guy called Rudolf von Bottendorf. I don't know if you ever heard of him, who was the founder of the Thule Society, who was Turkish, was German, but he was living in Turkey also, and was connected in Turkey, in Salonico, with the Sabbathian Frankists, who were themselves from the Sabbathian, original Sabbathians of Sabbatai Zevi, who had the Masonic Lodge in Salonico, where this guy was initiated and was then given these rituals that was then given to Adolf Hitler. These rituals are called the rituals of ancient operative Ottoman Freemasonry, are completely different, they have nothing to do with the regular Freemasonry, and they are based on the reading of certain surahs to empower yourself with a will and a power that is not of this world. And so when he was arrested for a brief period after there was the push, and Hitler was, for a brief moment, he was arrested, he actually studied these rituals, and he put them in practice by them vehicling and channeling these energies during his speeches. And that's how he submitted the whole of the German people to his own egregor.
But he was sponsored by the big bloodline families, though. Do you think that Hitler was used because he was a narcissistic psychopath, or was he an actor?
No, he was much more than that. He was a practicing occultist at one point, who knew exactly what he was doing. He was then financed by people like Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, gave him the money to then oppose communism, because in reality, National Socialism is socialism and is more close to communism. In fact, Goebbels got actually angry and got sad when Hitler criticized communism.
It's the same thing, basically. And what Stalin did and what Hitler did was totally similar and totally insane, huh?
Absolutely, totally insane. And the thing is that Rabbi Marvin S. Antelman wrote 2 books that I would suggest to people who want to really, and these books are published by the Zionist Book Club of Jerusalem. So maybe most people like Connie West will never read them, but they should read them. and that's why I cite them in my book. The book is called To Eliminate the Opiate, Volume 1 and 2. And in this book, you have the truth about the Sabbathean Frankist involvement with Adolf Hitler, the truth of the Sabbathean and Frankist involvement with the Rothschild families and everything they did. So, I mean, then you have also other rabbis that wrote extensively about the fact that there's been a lot of disinformation, especially this disinformation regarding the Khazars. Everybody says, oh, the Khazars are the ones who are the Jews who were not really Jewish, but they were in places like Ukraine. No, the Khazars in reality is not absolutely not the problem. And yes, they converted for a period to Judaism, but when it comes down to Judaism, you just go and have a DNA test, and then you see if you are Sephardic, if you are Ashkenazi, and then you don't have the Khazars or whatever.
And people also really truly have to separate the Zionists and from the Jews. That's also a very important thing.
That's another thing. Not all the Zionists are bad. The labor Zionists are bad. And the labor Zionists are actually a creation of the Sabbathean Frankists. And there is actually Jewish authors. I have a book here. Watch this book. This was by a guy I used to know, Barry Kamish. Now, go and check out the history of Barry Kamish, because this guy used to be very active in the truth movement a few years ago. He was living in Israel. The title of the book, Shabbatai Zevi, Labor Zionism and the Holocaust.
Can I ask you, Leo, while you're showing us that book, there's a lot of very controversial views out there, and it's dividing also people in the truth movement about their thoughts on the Holocaust. Just briefly, do you think it happened the way that it was described to us officially, the official narrative?
Sadly, it happened. Now, the numbers, we might never be sure of that, but Holocaust itself is a ritual. Actually, Holocaust was a name that is not really even appropriate to use, because in itself is actually giving out what this whole thing is a ritual. It's a ritual, and it's a sacrifice ritual. It's a human sacrifice. And I remember many years ago when a rabbi, I think one of the most eminent rabbis in Israel, said, we had to have that sacrifice because we had to pay for our sins of our people who had lent money for many centuries. And we actually karmically had to pay this price. I know it sounds shocking for some people, but the Holocaust is a sad event, and it's a true event. And actually anybody who even considers debunking it or just saying, it's not true, it's all a lie, it's all a propaganda, I can assure you that many people died because
it's also we've seen it in films, and we have heard so many stories and people who survived coming out talking about it. Although there is speculation whether the number was as great as they say, but who knows?
The number might not be 6 million, but even if it was 600,000,
exactly,
we're talking about at least
a satanic ritual, a huge world event that changed the world dramatically, obviously.
Changed the world dramatically, geopolitically, and of course, it was what the labor Zionists and the Sabbatheans, the Sabbathean Frankists wanted from the start. Because if you think about it, what greater sin is killing all those people? And the Sabbathian Frankists, we go back to their idea. Let's generate more sin possible so we can get the Messianic age closer. The Messianic age can only come once Israel is back in their own territory, and it calls itself Israel again, and the people of Israel are back in Israel only because of the Holocaust. There would have never been the creation of modern Israel without the Holocaust. But
and it also ties into Hollywood, right? As you are writing about in your new book so much, because that is also controlled by, you know, well, the top people in there are also Jewish, right?
But they are not any kind of Jewish people. They are, going back, Sabbathian Frankists. They are heretics. The thing is this, that I would like really, and that's why people like Kanye West really get it wrong, but a lot of viewers probably get it wrong too. It's like saying that all the Catholics are Satanists. No. The traditional Catholics today are fighting a war, and the FBI is going after them, and we saw it in the last couple of days. They had to backtrack, and they actually have a memo saying white supremacists go to traditional Latin masses. Because traditional Catholics now are perceived as the enemy. The Pope, for the last 3 years, he started a war against the Latin Mass. I explained in volume 6.66 why, and also in volume 7, also the creation of the one world religion that the Pope is accomplishing. But this Pope is anti-Latin Mass. He went after the bishops, after the priests to celebrate. Why is he against the Latin Mass? Because Satan hates Latin, because the rituals of the exorcism, and the Mass is an exorcism, are conducted in Latin, the effective ones. When the people, that's why you can't generalize the Catholic Church, because you have to instead say it's the Jesuits, it's the Second Vatican Council, it's everything that came out of the Second Vatican Council. The same thing can be said in Judaism. It's Sabbathian Frankism, it's everything the Sabbathian Frankists are. I mean, Woody Allen is not an Orthodox Jew by any means. He's a pedophile. Woody Allen is the typical example of everything that goes wrong in Hollywood. He married a daughter he adopted. So I really...
let me just, because I wanted to ask you this 45 minutes back when you mentioned Mia Farrow. This is just speculation, but I want to get back to what you're talking about. But I just want to ask you this. Yes. Do you think that Woody Allen is the father of Ronan Farrow? Have you seen him?
No comment. I guess that Farrow is a very particular kind of person. I mean, when we go back to that whole encounter with the Maharishi. Now, let's remember who the Maharishi is. Without the Maharishi, there will not be Deepak Chopra. There will not be probably all the people who are doing meditation today every morning, waking up thinking, the Maharishi is the guy who brought meditation to the West.
Yeah, but that's a good thing for so many people, meditation.
Yes, absolutely. But also a bad thing when those same people in the practices of meditation at times open themselves up to other forces. And at times they get manipulated by those Indian gurus who do, or other kind of gurus who, of course, can manipulate you once they see a weakness from you.
And boy, have gurus been manipulating people, herds of people, for I don't know how long, right?
Well, I mean, there is also the very interesting link between the Maharishi and the David Lynch Foundation, because then we go back to David Lynch. David Lynch, inspired by Kenneth Anger, David Lynch, who made Twin Peaks, which actually came out again recently, bringing us actually the homunculus experiments of Aleister Crowley in a fictional form, of course, and the whole of the Twin Peaks then becomes...
But certainly David Lynch is an amazing filmmaker. You have to agree on that, my God.
I admit that a lot of these artists can achieve some incredible accomplishments. At times, I don't agree with their mission, but doesn't mean that their art is less valid. I mean, when you go in St. Peter's Basilica and you see Michelangelo, you don't say, okay, this is actually the propaganda of the Vatican. Michelangelo was paid. He also put certain guys in a certain context because of certain things that were maybe specific to that time in which he was living. But we don't say that Michelangelo's art is bad. I mean, Michelangelo...
Of course not. And the same with a lot of filmmakers, even though... Yeah. And also, you know, some of them might want to expose some of what is going on. I mean, that's also...
Stanley Kubrick is an example. Stanley Kubrick is an example of somebody who maybe went a little bit too far. And Eyes Wide Shut was actually then completed by Steven Spielberg. And we don't know, we will never know how the original version might have been.
Exactly. And it's a fascinating topic because even what you saw in Eyes Wide Shut, what did come out was pretty shocking. But what we've heard that they took out 25 minutes is really wild, huh?
Then you have the other 25 minutes that were taken out of the 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah. Yes.
Actually, there was the film...
With the fake moon landing that he probably filmed and directed the fake moon landing, huh?
No, there is actually now a text on the internet of what was. He actually done the first 25 with a rabbi, a Jesuit, explaining the connections, religious connection with what he was about to present. Then the film studios thought that was a little bit too much to have Jesuit, a rabbi, and all these kind of religious people introducing a film like 2001 Space Odyssey because it will give them additional credibility. But Stanley Kubrick is a very interesting thing that we have a lot of movies from him also that we can consider inspirational. Some of them have been also kind of disturbing, like Clockwork Orange, of course. And,
which is basically about mind control and the Tavistock Institute and all of that, right?
Absolutely. So you see that substantially we have a film director who wanted to show more. Dr. Strangelove was the appetizer, but that's why I have it on the you see on the cover of the book. If you go, you have that appetizer that unfortunately is coming back in fashion because now we are talking more and more about the possibility of a nuclear Armageddon. So.
But it's a fascinating movie, certainly, also Dr. Strangelove, and he did a lot of amazing films. So did Roman Polanski, and this is also ties into all of his dark areas and how life imitates art in a way, right?
Well, I mean, he can't still come back to the US. He will be arrested because he has an accusation for pedophilia. I mean,
yeah, but a lot of people say that it wasn't true, that he was actually axed on purpose.
That's possible, but let's remember also that Roman Polanski connection to the occult in Rosemary's Baby, the fact that officially nobody wants to say there is a link with Anton LaVey. Some people say there is no link. Other people say there is a link. That Anton LaVey was actually called in to supervise on the content. He actually borrowed his eyes for the scene in which you see the devil appearing, you know, like...
in the cradle.
There is definitely... No, well, there was actually when he was impregnating...
yes, that's true, in that dreamy scene there. Yes.
In that impregnation of Rosemary, well, you have one of the greatest truths that was actually then laid out in many occult texts by Aleister Crowley, the production of a child that was capturing the spirit, the moon child, the fact that Aleister Crowley also conducted these experiments, but then also that lodge we talked earlier that was created in Hollywood and Jack Parsons, they actually went with Hubbard here in the middle of the desert and with a woman to conduct these rituals. And these rituals that Parsons said was for the invocation of the Antichrist, for the creation of an Antichrist. So he wasn't only a rocket scientist trying to send a man to the moon, or actually to work with who was working with Parsons in NASA, dear Lucas? Who were the people?
Werner von Braun, huh?
That's it. and so we didn't. When the war ended and we imported all these Nazi scientists here, they brought with them also their occult beliefs. Their satanic beliefs.
They certainly did, and they really did a lot of very, very bad things when they came to the U.S. That actually is part of the enslavement of humanity now, because mind control is something that is, that's all over the world. That we are slaves to a collective mind control ritual here, huh?
The first pages of my book, the first chapters of my book are dedicated to also the standardization of music. The fact that during the time of Goebbels, in 1939, they met together to standardize music to a certain frequency. We are used now to the 440A, when of course you said do. In the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si is the way we do it in Italy. Here is A, B, so it's a bit different. But I describe in detail how the 7 notes were born with Guido d'Arezzo in Italy, based on a verse which actually brings us to Saint John. And this verse, do, re, mi, fa, sol, si, becomes then the actual basis for the creation of music. Music is a sacred thing, but it can also become a demonic thing. Now, what they tried to do from 1939, both Goebbels and the Nazis, together with the BBC, so people will say, why? They were working with the English? Well, maybe people don't know, but England was very friendly, and the royals were very friendly with the Nazis before the war. They were actually, because they were German, part of them, the Hanoverian part of the family, not my part, because I'm related to the royal family through my grandfather, who was cousin to the Queen Mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. But she brought that Scottish...
Mountbatten was actually Battenberg, from Germany.
Those people were Hanoverians. They then changed to Windsors, but that's, and Queen Victoria was talking German. So, I mean, most of these people were talking German. So what happened was that, and I say this in volume 8 of my Confessions, let's not forget when Queen Elizabeth was giving the Nazi salute when she was a little child, because there is a photo that was published by all the tabloids a few years back with that is evidence of all this. So what happened was that they standardized music. What does it mean? It means that the Verdi tuning, the tuning that we call the Verdi tuning because of Giuseppe Verdi, the tuning that brought us to levels. When you play a track, you can actually, classic track, you can really see God. You can aim for the higher self. When you are instead listening to the same track with a different frequency, because the tonality is different, because they have made you tune the instrument in a certain way, you lose that content with above.
And that's why they did it. That's why they changed the frequency.
It was only the beginning of the change, because then the change of the war, I call it the war of frequency, or then the frequency of the devil, like I say in my book. Then the war continues with when we went from vinyl. Vinyl had the frequencies could go very deep. Actually, I remember when I was a record producer, I used to use, and I'm sure you know very well, digital audio tapes. Now, you know very well that digital audio tapes were tapes and could go down to 48 Hz. But when you will put the same product on a CD will cut it to 44.1. So that was another layer of oppression on the music. Then, like I explained in my book, we arrived to the Great Reset era, the streaming era with the MP3s, which are like it's like fast food of music. It's garbage. The quality.
And you can hardly stand listening to it. The frequencies coming from there is from all the recent music is just really horrible, right?
Because this frequency, because of course it's all done with this mentality that is the streaming of music. You will own nothing and be happy, because when I stream my Netflix, or when I stream Spotify, or when I buy my tracks on iTunes, do I have something physical? No.
You don't.
And you are happy, or you should be. But I'm not. I like my books like you have behind you. I like my vinyl. I have a collection still today back in Italy of over 10,000 vinyls.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. I have a lot of vinyls, but 10,000? Wow.
I think actually they're almost 15,000. Yeah. So they are kind of a lot. Thank God that they are still, my mother has not kicked them out of the house. I mean, but in any case, and then I have a collection of 10,000 books. And they're physical books. So, I mean, and of course, that collection comes also from my family, you know, because your great-grandfather gives them to grandfather, then gives it to your father. You have something that you leave to your posterity. With streaming, you will be left nothing because it's a digital desert that awaits you. So that's why I talk about the streaming being really part of the philosophy of the Klaus Schwab lot. Is you own nothing and you are happy. That's why they are pushing the streaming. No more DVDs, no more CDs, but also no more vinyl. And that is the interesting thing, Joe Lucas.
Well, the vinyl is kind of coming back as another.
That's why. That's what I was about to say. When you do all this, then you will have the opposite reaction from some people. Because now all the young people are actually going to say, oh, wow, can we get the vinyl? The problem with the vinyl today is, first of all, they have closed most of the factories in the world, creating a long line in front of, if you want to publish a record on vinyl today, you have to queue up at MPO in France for I don't know how many months. And also the product, the actual product which is used for vinyl is produced by only one guy in Japan. That guy is risking that then the whole manufacturing of these vinyls will disappear because they have simply sabotaged the whole thing. There were factories. In my days, when I was a record producer, I could go and print a record anywhere. They were cheap. I could go Czechoslovakia. I could go to London. I could go to Italy. I could go to Paris. I could go everywhere. Nowadays, instead, there is limited because at one point, 15 years ago, when they started to push the digital formats, the vinyl gradually, I think already from 20 years ago, they started in the early 2000s, the vinyl sales went down. And people like me who were record producers who like to produce in vinyl, I always stayed, actually I have here, I don't know if I can show you a record which I published only 2 years ago.
You can show it, of course.
Okay.
Don't worry.
We can propose this.
And this is one you did? You made this record?
Yes, of course. Okay, this is... sorry for that.
Are you going to lift the veil? Yes.
Lift the veil. This is a record. There's an unreleased project. I mean, I published something like 40 singles and 5 LPs during my record producing career, but some unreleased projects were have been put out recently on various labels. This one in particular is the unreleased projects of Pronto Recordings. As you can see, the symbolism is very interesting. I'll show it close up.
Yes.
Leo
Young, which is your music name.
And when you go in, you have, apart from, you have an explanation.
What kind of music is that, Leo?
This actually, when I used to be in the cover of DJ Mag, and when I, for example, there is all the flyers of when I was playing in Russia or playing and this is like all my past career as a DJ, record producer, and
so it's electronic music, Leo.
Electronic music, but my specialty, of course, is and was to mix elements of acoustic elements with electronic. And in the 90s, when I used to do that, it was kind of experimental back then. Nowadays, everybody does it. But I must say that the work that I've done is still so advanced music-wise that people still appreciate it to this day. So if you go on Google and you put Leo Young on YouTube, you can find a lot of my old tracks. And
people can hear it there on YouTube then, yeah?
Yes. Actually, there's a track, Psychedelic Billy, that was chosen by Stanton. Stanton is the one that makes the needles for playing the records. Made a compilation that opened with one of my tracks a few years back. So
wonderful. People should go and listen to that, definitely. I have a couple of important things. I have many topics, but I have a few that we must not miss here while we're still doing this interview. And I would like to ask you about the significance of the death of Pope Benedict the 16th, and also the significance of the death of Lisa Marie Presley a couple of days after Elvis's birthday, and of 2 days after Austin Butler, who played Elvis in that very great movie, by the way. I thought he played
which I talk about in my book. So it's actually.
Well, you couldn't have talked about her death because it hadn't happened.
No, but I talk about the film Elvis.
Yeah, and he had just won the Golden Globe, and she was there, and then she died. So let's talk about those two things.
First
I definitely want to
cover,
and about the year 2023. Okay.
Okay. Going back to the first question, you want to touch on?
Yes, the death of Pope Benedict the 16th. He did not seem like a very charming and very nice man. He seemed very vile and suspicious, I have to say.
Okay, in my book, Volume 8, I have a whole chapter dedicated to the post-conciliatory world of the Catholic Church. What happened after the Second Vatican Council? Now, Ratzinger, before becoming Pope, he actually worked within the Second Vatican Council. He was active in the Second Vatican Council, and before becoming Pope, he was also in charge of what used to be the Holy Inquisition. So
he was a Nazi as a young boy.
And of course, he was a Nazi as a young boy. Now, in my book, I explain how the Second Vatican Council really changed things in the Catholic Church, because the Second Vatican Council transformed the Mass. It was no longer in Latin after the second. First of all, there was a Satanic Mass conducted during the Second Vatican Council in 1963, which Father Malachi Martin talked about. And this Mass apparently saw also the participation of Joseph Ratzinger. He was rather young then, but he was already, like I said, one of the personalities of the Second Vatican Council, because he was already a known theologian. Later on, he became in charge of the Holy Inquisition, and in the early 80s, the Vatican lifted the censorship on a number of music groups that could finally be played openly even on the Vatican and Catholic radios, including the Beatles, because the Beatles have been censored for a long time because they had put Aleister Crowley on the cover. So they had become censored. Things changed after the Second Vatican Council because the Mass was no longer a Latin Mass with the priest facing, basically not facing you, but facing rather the altar on the other side of the altar, where you have all the... So that was the Tridentine Mass. It was a different kind of Mass, and it was a Mass that was the same all over the world. You could go in India, you could be in South America, you will have the same Latin Mass. A little bit like the Muslims when they pray. The Muslims, they pray in Arab, even if they don't know Arab. They do the same prayer all together at the same time. No? And the same thing was for the Latin Mass. That, of course, was the first thing that the Satanists wanted to avoid. Latin. Latin is their enemy. And the Second Vatican Council ended in December 1965. Year zero of Satanism, 1966, started in January 1966. And that is when the teachings of the Second Vatican Council started to be implemented gradually. So,
can I just jump in here quickly, Leo? 1966, because of the year 66, a reference to a satanic number.
Well, of course, and actually it was the year in which, in fact, Satanism was popularized with Anton LaVey. In my book, I explain the three phases of modern Satanism, and then we have Anton LaVey, 1966. In the middle of the 70s, 74, 75, you have the second schism of the Church of Satan, which was triggered by a ritual to invoke the spirit of Marilyn Monroe. And I talk in detail in my book about when Michael Aquino and Anton LaVey go and do this ritual. So because Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino wanted to know what happened really to Marilyn Monroe and wanted to evoke her spirit. So this is a dark ritual. At the end of the night, Michael Aquino was then given by Anton LaVey the supreme title of Magister Templi that only he held. And after that, he left the church and he founded the Temple of Set. Now, the third and last phase of modern Satanism instead was born in 2012 with the foundation of the Satanic Temple by Lucian Greaves. Anton LaVey was a Sabbathean Frankist Jew. Lucian Greaves, the founder of the Satanic Temple, is actually a Sabbathean Frankist Jew. It's not a coincidence. Marilyn Manson is a Sabbathean Frankist Jew. So, I mean...
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, jumping out of my ear here.
So it's kind of like all this... it's important for people to realize the phases of modern Satanism, because the last phase is their political involvement. Now the Satanic Temple goes around the capitals of the various states in the United States, parading their Baphomet statue, siding with the Democrat Party in a lot of issues, opening an abortion clinic. They just open an abortion clinic, the Satanic Temple. But this is very different from the first phase of Anton LaVey, who was simply making Satanism cool and pop-tastic with the Satanic Bible, who became the most sold book in the United States after the Bible.
Unbelievable. But Joseph Ratzinger, that yes, Pope Benedict XVI, he was taken off his duty, the first pope in hundreds of years. What had he done?
He was also of Jewish origin, and he was descending all the way from a rabbi in Worms, which is basically the place where they wrote the magic of Abramelin the Mage that was later practiced by Aleister Crowley, who then received in 1904 the Book of the Law, which is basically the foundation for all these Illuminati, do what they will, and all the philosophy was channeled by the wife of Aleister Crowley after this invocation in the Great Pyramid. And so I just wanted to say that because maybe people will read soon my book and they will realize the importance of this revelation that this demon transmitted these words that were channeled through the wife of Aleister Crowley, but Aleister Crowley had indulged in a ritual that was just being translated a few months earlier and had been completed by MacGregor Matters, who also had made him in 1903 in charge of the republication of the Goetia. So for the first time, the Goetia had been republished, and Crowley, first thing he did, well, he married with this Rose Kelly. He went on this honeymoon in Egypt. He went inside the Great Pyramid. He opened the book, invocation of the book. He did the first invocation on the book inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. You know what that means? That means opening the gates of hell, man. It's like you're literally attracting some forces that are out of this world that you want to keep out of this world. But that, unfortunately, wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm. So Ratzinger died here.
Ratzinger died, and he died isolated, like I wrote in my website that, as you know, I always keep updated.
But he was asked to stand down as a pope, wasn't he? He was actually compromised because he had done something really not great, really bad, huh?
Yes, like I explained in my book, which was a bestseller, Pope Francis the Last Pope, ? That came out in 2015. He was basically forced by the Jesuits. He was easily blackmailable because he had a lot of skeletons in the closet, including his homosexuality, but also other things that were not regarded as cool by the Catholic. But at one point, there was he went to Milan in 2012 to the was called the Festival of the Families. And when he arrived in Milan, receiving him, there was Cardinal Maria Martini. Cardinal Martini, basically, this guy is a Jesuit. And he went to him, and he just very openly, and this has actually been witnessed by the secretary of this cardinal. He before he died, he said this. He said to Ratzinger, well, now it's time to resign. And so people would say, but how can a cardinal say to a pope to resign? Well, it wasn't any kind of cardinal. He was a Freemason, and he was a member of the St. Gallen Mafia. But he was also talking on behalf of, let's say, and he was also a Sabbathean Frankist. In fact, he asked to be buried in Israel. this cardinal, you know? So Cardinal Maria Martini is somebody who people should understand was the mentor of Jorge Mario Bergoglio, of the future Pope Francis. He had already tried in 2005 to get Pope Francis elected, but Ratzinger had too many votes. And they used also to defame Pope Francis to stop him. The future Pope Francis, at the time it was only Jorge Mario Bergoglio, was only a cardinal. They used a book called The Island of Silence, I think it's called, that came out in Argentina, in which they describe the story of these two Jesuits who were arrested because of a snitch by the future Pope Francis when he was the superior of the Jesuit order in Argentina. And they were tortured for many months, kept in this island, covered. And so Francis was responsible for that.
Oh, wow. You've actually called Pope Francis for the Black Pope. Several people have called him that. And some people speculating that maybe he was the Antichrist.
He is the false prophet. He's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist is not yet fully in charge, or maybe we have seen him partially in charge. He will be more in charge later on.
But you're speculating that the Antichrist is part of the royal family in Britain, huh?
That is one of the possibilities. We have, you see, the thing is that you need a bloodline, and the bloodline of the Queen is a very particular one.
Are you talking about Prince William?
Yes. Of course, Prince William. We can also say that some have accused Prince Charles of being the Antichrist, and he's definitely the Great Resetter. But because who started the Great Reset? Prince Charles and Klaus Schwab. But Prince William, of course, might be the guy who ultimately becomes this figure. But he's not going to.
Is that the reason why Prince Harry has broken away from the family and become almost a star in America, doing talk shows and a book now and doing a reality show?
I talked about that. I talked about Oprah Winfrey. I talked about Oprah Winfrey, who is the queen of the queen of the Illuminati here in America, of the ones in the show business here in America. She is a very evil person, Oprah Winfrey, let me tell you, because let's not forget all the things that she did when she promoted also certain people on her show, including Michael Aquino, including that other guy who then became known for his sectarian, I think Brazilian guy.
But she had many different people on to talk. I mean,
to talk is one thing, but when it comes, have you ever heard of John of God?
Yes.
Well, John of God is not she actually supported them completely. I mean, John Texero de Fari, I mean, he's a guy, self-proclaimed medium, healer, whatever, but Oprah Winfrey went to him, endorsed him. It wasn't simply a guest on his show.
She certainly is very powerful in America, and a very rich lady, huh?
No, but also this guy, this Brazilian guru, he was a guy who was doing human trafficking, human harvesting of organs, pedophilia. I mean, he's in jail now.
How horrible.
And Oprah Winfrey would have become president of the United States if it wasn't for John of God. Because of what happened with John of God, between her and John of God, now she can't be president of the United States because their plan was to put her as president of the United States.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's...
So I think that was like, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it was worth it.
We have so much to talk about, Leo. So Prince Harry, do you think he's broken away? Do you think it's real, or is all of that staged, that he's now speaking out against his own family, and also saying that he has had a lot of conflicts with his own brother, Prince William?
Yeah. A lot of conflicts, but also this is a very particular family, let me tell you. I mean, I know a little bit of it because of my direct link to it.
I think maybe Jordan Maxwell told me that, but definitely, well, David Icke and many others have talked about them being reptilian shapeshifters.
They have links to the occult, which are very ancient. I mean, even in my family, in the castle of the Lion family of Lord and Lady Strathmore, they used to do an invocation to Lucifer every Friday. They had very much an occult tradition. But I don't see myself as having a tail between my legs or having something different physically. I don't shape shift, at least I don't see.
Well, it's not you, of course, but I mean, I'm just saying that a lot of people say they've seen them do that at satanic rituals.
Yeah. The satanic rituals part, I tell you, is highly probable, because I know of satanic rituals conducted by the English royals, the English elite. That is something, I mean, I was part of a lodge in London, both in Freemasonry and also the OTO. So I had also direct experience with some things.
And they can evoke demons so that you can see them. They manifest.
Well, I mean, let's not forget that John Dee and Edward Kelly with Elizabeth I, John Dee was the first 007, and he was actually the guy who created the Nokian tablets. And these people say they were evoking the angels, but they were evoking fallen angels. They were in contact with these fallen angels. They were indulging, and actually those Enochian tablets were later used by Aleister Crowley. So, I mean, it's not like... an hypothesis or a speculation. I remember this, Lucas. I try to stand by the facts, because I know that the content of my book, as it is, without having to go into speculations, is already very heavy and very important.
And people will connect the dots with all of the different researchers, yes, yours and David Icke's and Jordan's and everybody. But do you think that Lisa Marie Presley, do you think that was a satanic sacrifice done by purpose?
In my book, I talk very much about, not so much about her, but very much about her father. Because her father was grown up in a certain situation, surrounded by animists, voodoo practitioners. And let's not forget that the very roots of rock music, blues and stuff, I mean, let's go and talk about blues. I mean, blues, we're talking about people who did the Crossroads Pact with the Devil. Right at the start, there is not only legends, but there is stories and stories of people. And then we arrive all the way to Bob Dylan, who also himself is said to have done the same kind of Crossroad Pact. In my book, I explain how even the name Bob Dylan, who is not his real name, is inspired by a guy who was basically a disciple of Victor Norberg, who was with Aleister Crowley doing the Coronzon ritual. Bob Dylan himself admits to having made a pact. Some people say, oh, but he made a pact with God. You don't make a pact with God. He
actually said on camera that he made a pact with the devil.
Yes, that's it. He made a pact with the devil. So Lisa Marie was born out of a person, Elvis Presley, who conducted himself hand in hand with the military industrial complex all his life, all the way to his death. Who was taking care of his business? A guy...
The colonel.
And like I explained in my book, he wasn't even a proper colonel. He had stolen this title. Then he
was fake, actually, in that way, huh?
But he was a dark and sinister character.
Exactly. But maybe he was under, certainly under the influence of all of these people around him and the colonel, and maybe even part of a mind-controlled experiment.
Like I explained in my book, there was actually, and I report facts, there were experiments conducted at his very first concerts, especially the one in Vancouver. And I talk about all the details about this experiment and how they use this psychology of the masses so they could address this reaction. It's a little bit like the myth of the Beatles when they came here in America and the girls, it was all stage. And when the Beatles met with Elvis Presley, that was another thing which I also talk about in my book. And so I can say that Lisa Marie, who also married Michael Jackson, and in my book, I talk about how Michael Jackson was killed because of the Beatles songs, who he was owner of. And he didn't want
bought them, yes.
The day after he died, iTunes acquired the rights for the Beatles songs. and the possibility of publish them on iTunes. That was always refused by Michael Jackson. Apple...
There are probably many explanations or reasons why they did that and staged his death or killed him off.
No, well, they actually killed him, and there is a Freemason in charge of the killing who is basically his doctor. And I explain which lodge he belonged to and why that lodge was so important in my book.
Yeah, so, that doctor certainly plays a very important role as well. And Lisa Marie married him, which was suspicious in itself. And then her son, I forget the name. Her son, which was Elvis's grandson, committed suicide in 2020, just 3 years ago. And supposedly she never overcame that, of course, who would?
And another thing, which I also discuss in my book, she sold Graceland to Spillerman. I don't know if you know about that, but basically this guy was, who also died later, was the guy who wanted to control the whole of the EDM music scene. And so there is all that part also in my book. I explain how.
So we are speculating a little bit here that it's suspicious that she died after just has been seen, after Austin Butler had gotten the award for playing her father. She'd just been at Graceland for Elvis's 85th birthday and all of that. So it does certainly make a profound impact on people.
Even in the film, I saw the Elvis film, actually. That film I saw. And I saw that there is elements that if you see that also support everything I wrote in my book about his upbringing within the black blues, animist, voodoo culture. That guys, the thing is that in the end, when it comes down to music, good music, at times, there has been involvement of other, how you want to call it, beings not from this world. It's like John Lennon who said, I simply go to sleep, I empty my head and I fill it up. They fill it up for me. They actually give me this stuff. I don't know where it comes from.
It's a sad thing when you enjoy listening to all of that, the great music from, well, certainly from the past, huh?
They are simply channeling. They open at times using drugs. They channeled this information and they relate on music, which is great, of course, because it's not of this world. Is that, so of course it will attract you, because if this music was made possible by a jinn, an entity, a demon who possessed, Jimi Hendrix is the example, primal example of a guy who was basically possessed and using that possession to actually stage the best guitar playing in the world. But
wasn't he just talented? I mean, there's something just called talent.
No, but he said it. No, there is actually in my book, I explain about Jimi Hendrix and some details of his personal life and stuff.
And he was part of what they call Club 27, huh? All of these artists.
When it comes to the Club 27, of course, it is a reality, but I think it's a diabolical synchronicity also. It's not only like, it's not particularly studied, like, okay, it's 27, now we have to whack this person off or get rid of them, At times it's actually the synchronicity, and synchronicity, though, can be diabolic. And the synchronicity, like the police called the tracks synchronicity, but it is not like synchronicity is what Jung used to call synchronicity. It's a very, very important topic that he actually Jung used to study with a physician called Pauli. He used to have this exchange.
Because we are a part of an illusionary world, so everything is attraction as well, law of attraction, really. In our remaining moments here, Leo, we must address this year and the because I know that you've talked about this recently.
Yes. And I talk about it in my book, 23, because of course, we said in my book, I have people like Genesis P. Orridge. Now, for people who don't know who Genesis P. Orridge is, I will urge you to go and, he was a musician, but he was also much more for the Illuminati. He was a a guy who transformed himself, who made of, at one point in the last part of his life, he was exchanging body parts with his female. He was becoming a woman, but he was also exchanging body parts with his own woman.
What?
Yeah,
how can you do that?
They were doing some kind of weird, they called it like some kind of performance art of doing things, exchanging and becoming. It was like insane what he was conducting. In fact, he died.
He would have been enjoyed by Marina Abramovich, huh?
No, Marina Abramovich followed very much Genesis P-Orridge. Absolutely. She was part of the people who followed the Temple of Psychic Youth. There is a direct connection with and actually she's a small player compared to what he was. Genesis P-Orridge was born in 1950 and died in 2020. So he died basically in the middle of the pandemic, and maybe people didn't give much importance to this guy. I met him because he was collaborating with both Brian Geisen and William Burroughs, and they brought on stage a performance that was actually taken care of, the publicity for it, and the event was taken care by my grandmother and by a gentleman known as Terry Wilson, who made a book called Planet 101 with Brian Geisen. And Genesis P-Orridge was a guy who was actually into the cut-up technique. Now, without going into the detail of the cut-up technique, but William Burroughs and Brian Geisen made of the cut-up technique a way of life, which means cutting pieces of words, putting them together, assembling them together, but also music, art, because they were also visual artists at times. And then Brian Geisen, who himself was very close also to Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, who died a very sad death.
Also at 27, huh?
Also at 27. So when it comes down to the Genesis P-Orridge and the Temple of Psychic Youth, I will urge people to go and study, because the Temple of Psychic Youth, abbreviated TOPY, was one of the most influential within the music world, with groups like Coil, Current 93, but also KLF, which, of course, I write at the start of the rave movement, and that What Time Is Love. And KLF is the one that went on an island and burnt £1 million in front of the journalists and shocked the world. I mean, and they were promoting all this, the Illuminati, the Discordianism idea that Robert Anton Wilson was pushing through. So I urge people to really go and study my book in detail, because they will find really a lot of inspiration, and they will understand that in the end, nothing has been left untouched by the controllers.
But this year, 2023, is a significant year because of the number.
23. Now, William Burroughs was the one who started to talk about the importance of the number 23, but also Aleister Crowley before him. In fact, Aleister Crowley had a chapter of the Book of Lies, Skidoo, and there was actually a group after 23 Skidoo. Huh? And so we have William Burroughs, who learned about the number 23 by somebody telling him a story. And the story was, he went to Burroughs and said, well, I have this ship. This ship, he was, I think, in Morocco at the time. I have this ship, and it's been going great for 23 years. The day after, the ship sank. But on the same night, William Burroughs heard also, if I remember well, on the radio, that flight 23 had fallen, I think, in Florida or something. So he connected the two things, the synchronicity of the number 23, and he started to study number 23. In fact, there is actually a film dedicated to the number 23 with Jim Carrey, no? Which is also a very important movie. And so I will also suggest people who are interested in the number 23. 23 were the Grand Master of the Order of the Knights Templars. 23 is 2 and 3 is 5, which is the pentagram. 23 is definitely a number of transformation, and that's why 2023 is so important. This might be the year in which they formalize the Third World War, the actual beginning of it. They might actually formalize it. It's already started, has been we can say that the Third World War has been going on since this whole problem in Ukraine started in 2014. And there's been also other wars surrounding it. But I think that 2023 might be the year in which, unfortunately, it would be formalized. So,
but can we also expect a change for the better in 2023, do you think?
I think that in 2023, the people who want to protect the reality from all this will maybe realize there is a path, alternative path. They will also realize the limitations of wanting to fight a system which is a military industrial complex that you can't physically fight because they're going to destroy you. I mean, it's like you say, well, you know, I want to oppose all this. Yeah, but how are you going to oppose it? This is NATO. They want to do war, they're going to have war. The thing is that, you know, it's like they are going there picking on the bear. Then the bear is going to reply at one point or the other, is going to answer very angry. And that bear, of course, is Russia. But like I said in volume 7, it's about a Sino-Russian new world order that is kind of coming together. The Russian, but also the Chinese element that doesn't want to be any longer submitted to America. That was up until now the driving force of this new world order since the end of the Second World War. So I think that this year, yes, people will realize things. They will realize also that we are going towards a point of no return. And then they will have to act accordingly, like build maybe with their own friends something different, far away from a city, not depending on the artificial intelligence, not depending on everything that is pushed in the smart cities. Like I said in volume 7, smart is equals Satan, smartphone, smart car, smart house. You want to avoid any contact with the artificial intelligence once the grid is closed. Because once the grid is closed and once you're microchip, there's no way of turning back. So if you, Lucas Alexander, have, for example, I make an example here. You have a sister who gets microchipped. It's a point of no return. If my mother decides to have a microchip, it's a point of no return. I will not be able to talk with my mother anymore because I know that she will have entered the point of no return. So it would be like, you know, it's a separation here. The people who want to work for the kingdom of God, knowing that God has promised us that when all this evil is going to manifest, we have a choice and we have also a chance. And so I'm a believer. I think that he will give us a chance to construct something different. But please.
And you're, of course, a Christian, so you're also to speak from a Christian point of view. And there will be
but not only Christian. Judeo, Christian, and Islam is all the same when it comes down to the end times. They don't have a difference here. They have a Messiah. Maybe the Christians have this idea, which is a little bit, romantic, with Jesus coming down from the clouds. The Jews have a more realistic idea, which is reincarnation, which is also political, a figure.
But there are also people in this field who really believe in source and the force, which is what people call God, a universal power, which is not put into a Christian or a Jewish perspective.
Yeah, but all religions converge on the fact that at one point or the other there is a manifestation of a man who is the reflection of God on earth. Don't think that all the religions of the world are made out of fantasies, because that's going to be your downfall. There is going to be a downfall also for the enemy, who wants to instead put in charge the Antichrist and thinks everything is materialistic. Oh, okay, yes. Okay, he is the real Messiah. But in reality, is the Antichrist, a figure that may be like, I said Prince William, but it can be Barack Obama. It can be, paradoxically, an Antichrist is also Zelensky, who comes suddenly out of nothing on the world stage. These are various Antichrists. Then we will see who is the one that ultimately reigns over all the other Antichrists. But there is also many false prophets, and those false prophets are abounding in this age. And they will tell you, don't worry, construct your own reality. Everything will be fine. We can meditate in the morning and everything will be fine. It's not going to be fine, because this planet in the next 7 years will become a grid, and a grid in which you can hide in the most remote corner. You will have a satellite on top of you.
And you don't think that we can change that, or there are forces working for the good?
There will be a clash. There will be a clash. They want to eliminate basically 70 to 90% of the population of this planet. And they will do it. And they're already starting to do it. And unfortunately, those people, without saying, what we all know, the things that will trigger the algorithms, and already the fact that we have to talk in codes because they are already monitoring.
We have to, because otherwise,
But that is already a sign of the times we're living.
Of course. Heavily censored.
So what I'm saying here is,
people still need hope, and people still need a good message. What is your best message for people?
My message is go back to what was promised to us 2,000 years ago. When the time comes and we are close to the mark of the beast, you have to make a choice. If you get that mark, and that mark is the microchip inserted in your body, which is gonna be something that people will line up in front of probably the Apple store to get, is going to be considered cool by the young kids. Well, that is the moment in which you have to decide who is your family, who is your friends. It's a choice. In the next 7 years, people that are like-minded, they will then decide which are the parts of this world which are safer in the case the situation. Because let's remember that we're going to have pandemics, but we're also going to have nuclear war. We're going to have things that bring down the population of this earth dramatically. And it's going to be dramatic to see all this. So please come out of your bubble thinking that somebody's going to save the day for you. You're going to have to save the day for you and your family, accordingly with also God, which I believe will, in the end, give us the possibility of a savior. Now, that savior came already once, is said to be coming 2 times. Let's not get confuse ourselves with the cosmic Christ, New Age approaches, which in the end is like, oh, the spirit, yes, it's fine. We're going to embrace the spirit of change of Christ. Everything. Let's be realistic, Lucas. It's not going to be an easy task to survive in the end times. It's not going to be easy to witness the most amazing timing, because for me the apocalypse, the revelation, as it's called, the book of Revelation, also it's the revelation, it's the moment of revelation, is an amazing moment. Then I don't know if I'm going to survive it, but even if I die tomorrow morning, I know that I've done my little part in the creation of a future humanity. But a future humanity can't be left to fake gurus who go on and tell you, oh yes, just join me in my eco-friendly, sustainable village. You give me all your money and I will take care of you. Or we will have, there is a lot of people that will take advantage of weak minds. So,
and they always have, and they still do.
Even in the worst moment.
But luckily, a lot of people have woken up to what is going on, and we see more and more people waking up every day. And we're all, you and I and a lot of other people that we know, we're doing our best to wake up people and inform them about how to be human on this planet, huh?
We try, and before he died, Jordan Maxwell and I had many discussions on this topic, on the possibility of creating a village of like-minded individuals. We didn't really want to create, a whole nation, change because we understood at one point that it was pointless to continue to think that the majority of people will change when they have been constantly brainwashed by cinema, by music, by drugs that were pushed on them for a specific reason. Every single drug.
History and the educational system, it's all part of dumbing people down.
Dumbing people down. So I'm glad that today, with this show that we have done together, we have possibly educated some people that can make some clever choices for them, for their family, for their friends in the next few years, and not find themselves suddenly in a situation which will be like caught by surprise, no? Oh, what is happening? Oh, the stock market have crashed. Oh, I can't go and get any more my money at the cash machine. Oh, I can't go to the whole supply chain is broken. What should I do? No, I don't want you like that. I want you to get prepared.
Exactly. And I think really this has been really amazing, informative, and great as always. And just before we end, do tell people, now that we've spoken so much about your book, how they can purchase it.
My book, you can purchase it on Amazon. You can, of course, find all the links at leozagami.com. And it's published in 2 languages, English and Italian. If you have any Italian viewers, and we are basically promoting this book through Amazon, which might not be ideal, but for me it's convenient because at the moment I don't have, a big storage facility where I can put thousands of books, or I don't have the possibility of selling them to distributions, for example, in Italy, because I'm censored in Italy. So the only way of getting, for example, to my Italian audience is through Amazon, paradoxically. So it is actually working up until now, because the algorithms up until now have been tolerant enough to not censor us. Buy it on paper rather than on digital format, because I make the Kindle, I provide the Kindle, because of course people, this is a 700-page book. You can't really bring it on the beach. You can bring on the beach a Kindle, and that is okay. It's a handy
But
thing.
People can get both.
They can get both, but I will always suggest to get, even if you get the Kindle, always a paper copy, because this is going to stay for you, for your family, for your friends, and for also future generations.
And it's still being published by Brad Olson, CCC Publishing Company?
No, this is actually a new publishing company, which we started 5 years ago with my wife. It's called Cursum Perficio, which is based here in Palm Springs. We used to have it back in Italy when we started this operation. And I guess that we still collaborate, of course, with Brad Olson, which as you know, has brought out 5 of my books. But the particularity of the books that I brought out with Cursum Perficio is that most of these books were actually written from the start in English rather than translated. This book here instead, because it came out in both languages, actually saw the translation effort once again of my wife, but and also the adaptation, especially because, you have to translate and you have to adapt it. So people who read it, they don't have the impression this is a translated book, because in the end, what I did is like, while I was writing the Italian book, I just passed on the material also to my wife, and we tried in a way to make it possible that this is a bilingual book in the end, thanks to the efforts, especially when it comes to the English edition of my wife.
Yes.
So thank you so much for having me on, Lucas. It's always a pleasure. And God bless you for all the work that you're doing, trying to awake people all over the world. And like always you said during the show, also have words of hope for people. Now, we know that everything seems to be going in their own direction, but we also know that there will be a new world at one point, and that a new world will be laid out, the foundations of which we are laying out now. We might not be able to rely further on the technology that is provided, like the one we are even using today, because we know that this technology is all embedded with the enemy. And so at one point we will have to go back to the good old ways and probably talk in big halls and just make ourselves acquainted with our audience directly, with no longer the internet, once the internet will become even more censored. Who knows what will happen?
Who knows, yeah. But certainly, Leo, this has been amazing and informative and great as always. It's always wonderful to have you on the show. Your knowledge is extensive and it's a great gift to everybody. And I want to thank you so much, Leo Zagami, for once more being on Age of Truth TV. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And if you have more questions about this book, Ordo Illuminatorum Universalis at gmail.com is also our email if anybody is interested in having any information on this book. And I hope that like-minded people like us can come together more and more to construct an alternative reality. Just don't expect the majority of people like me and Jordan in the end said to accept all this.
No, absolutely. And next time when we'll have you on again, we can maybe talk more about a great way of constructing such a community, which will be very informative for a lot of people. Absolutely. Thank you, Leo, and have a wonderful day in Palm Springs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to you, to Lodge. Take care, guys. And
Yes.
have a great 2023.
Thank you very much to Leo LYON ZAGAMI, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruthtv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, ageoftruthtv as well. Please also subscribe to our alternative channels on BitChute and Brighteon. Your support is greatly needed and very appreciated. And on behalf of the Age of Truth TV team, we thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.